Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion on mastering communication. Yes, you heard me right. I said good morning, and I shall add good afternoon, and good evening, and good night, and enjoy your meal and get out of bed, because I heard that we have people from all around the world today. Isn't that exciting? And I get the chance of being right in the center of the world right now. Do you know where that is? No, it's not a place. Don't we all too often get, aren't we all too often guilty of feeling like we are the center of the world, that everything revolves around us, and that we are the center of attention? Well, right now I am the center of attention, so I'm the center of your worlds. And yet we are here to honor those who have learned to perfect the art of sharing their stories, revealing their world to others in 7 minutes, 29 seconds. Those who have sailed who have set their sails to the top of the world of public speaking. You know, some of you who might have been to Hawaii might know the road to Hana. It is considered one of the most beautiful roads in the world. And yet, the road to Hana, with its beautiful greens and lushes, creeks and waterfalls, it sneaks up the flank of a volcano and overlooks the ocean. It is not about Hana, it's about the road. Those who chase the destination blindly forego the beauty of the journey. Similarly, today, we are here to talk about the journey on the road to the World Championships. For some, this might start by going beyond first impressions. For others, it might be about finding their buried stories. Or for others, it might be about looking at somebody's eyes and saying, "It's so nice to see you." Before we begin, however, with our wonderfully talented guest and humorous chair, I would like to take the opportunity to present today's club sponsoring the event. It is not a club like any other. It is a club who holds its core values tight as lead. It is a club woman-led. It is a club who leads women to finding their voices. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Women Lead Toastmasters President, Renee Yao.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, awesome. And you guys can see my screen? Yes? Okay, great, awesome. All right, and thank you everyone for joining our meeting today. I'm your president at Women Lead Toastmasters Club. And in the chat window here, I just shared with you guys our webpage for you to learn more information. And we have the great honor to hear from some of the finest finalists and presenters on their journey in public speaking. And this meeting is sponsored by Women Lead Toastmasters. LEAD stands for Leadership, Empowerment, Advancement, and Diversity. Of course, it's not just only open for women, men and women both are welcome. And this club looks to empower your voices, and we provide a safe platform to practice public speaking, empowering women leaders, and develop skills through workshops. You can learn more about our club culture through our webpage, womenleadtm.com. And we share our learnings, books that we like to read, and also host workshops like these to enrich your bi-weekly Toastmasters experience on Wednesdays. For those of you who might just be joining us because you saw a LinkedIn post or Twitter or got an email from your friend and don't know what Toastmaster is, Toastmaster is an international club where leaders are made. And we now have more than 360,000 members across 145 countries and 16,000 some clubs globally. So feel free to visit any clubs that fits your vision or dreams, or that you can find a place to practice your speeches. And of course, many of us are on pathways. Pathways essentially have these tailored learning experience for you. And many of us can stay after the meeting to answer any of your questions about pathways that you may have. For those of you who like to join our conversation over Slack, this is the way that you can use your QR code, or in this link right here can join our Slack channel to ask additional questions. And I'll send that also through the chat window here, just so you guys can stay up to date, and I can approve you guys through the Slack channel as well. And of course, emails and others also work. And now I would like to turn it back to the Toastmaster for today and begin the core part of our meeting. Thank you so much for giving me a few minutes to talk about our club.
Thank you, Renee. Thanks for introducing this beautiful club that you are leading right now. And now I'd like to introduce our panel chair. He is a retired Marine and consultant to the Department of Defense. He's also the host of his radio show, Good Vibrations Radio, which is now a podcast since 2007. He has served at club, area, and district levels, and he currently supports the district club growth team. Please help me introduce Salazar de la Porta. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Cedric. And I would like to say, unlike Cedric, I am not at the center of the world. The center of the world today are the three ladies that we're here to hear from. And they are, I'll wait till they all pop up and then I'll go through it. One more, Abhijit, there we go. So they are Maureen Zappala, Lindy McLean, and Luisa Montalvo. They are the center of our universe from this moment forward. And we're just here to learn a little bit more about them. And I'm going to start in order. I'm going to give a little intro of each person, a little bio information, and then start the questioning. We'll do it in turn, and then we'll just kind of open the floor to them. If any of you, while listening, have questions, please put them into the chat room, and then Abhijit or Cedric will pass them out at different times so we can get those questions addressed. Because just because I'm the moderator doesn't mean I have all the right questions. So we'll start right away with Maureen Zappala. Now, one of the things about Maureen is she can say something the rest of us can't. She is an actual rocket scientist. So when she says something's not rocket science, she knows what she's talking about. She has a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Notre Dame. And as a NASA rocket scientist and engineer, she's had success in direct sales, fitness instruction, and motherhood as well. Now a professional speaker, she challenges organizations to push the envelope of their own expectations. So besides managing NASA's, we got to say this, full-scale altitude simulation jet engine research test facility, also known as Propulsion Systems Laboratory. She's been a speaker with Making It Count, a Monster Inc. subsidiary, where she led in-school seminars for high school students to prepare them for successful college experience. She's been a member of Toastmasters since 1999. She's a winner of over 40 speech contests. And in 2009 and 2010, is that correct, Maureen? You were a finalist in the Toastmasters? No?
2009 and then 2020.
And then 2020, I meant to say 2020, but I used my tongue instead. So she's competed against, 25, 30,000 different contestants in Toastmasters to reach that place at the World Championship of Public Speaking. So help me welcome Maureen Zappala as our first conversant individual, our first champion that we'll speak with. So welcome so much, Maureen. Now, we know you've been a Toastmaster since 1999, and that's a 21-year period, but over 40 speech contests. And actually, I'll bet you I got that 40 speech contests before 2020. So I'm sure there's been a lot more since then. But I've got to ask you, what brought you to Toastmasters? And then what led you to compete?
Well, to clarify, I've been in Toastmasters 3 times. The first time was in 1997. Over the course of the last however many years, I was in and out a few times. So it's close to 15 years, I think. But what brought me to Toastmasters, this is funny. I was actually giving a presentation to a group of teenagers at a church. Tough audience. At the end of the talk, one of the parents, one of the moms came up to me and said, I enjoyed your speech. Have you ever heard of Toastmasters? Now, I hadn't, but having been in it now for a long time, we kind of know that's code language for, oh my gosh, you need us now. But when she told me what it was, that it was a place where leadership skills are, well, actually, that was before leadership was part of our tagline. It was about becoming a better communicator, becoming a better speaker. And I was doing a lot of speaking at the time, mostly in churches, at youth groups and women's groups. And so I thought, I'm all on board, let's go. And yeah, visited, I don't know, 2-3 clubs, found one that felt like home, and signed the agreement, and that's the rest of the story.
Well, with 40 speech contests, you must
Actually,
have
by
done.
now it's way more than 40. That was an
Yeah,
old
that's right.
introduction. It's got to be close to 60.
Oh, we'll say 150, over 150 speech contests.
Now, I think I lost more than I won, so there's that too.
But I was going to say, as a part of that, what gave you the bug to go for the competition end of it versus just the learning end of it?
Oh, the shiny things. I think it was like, and plus I'm competitive. I entered my first contest no less than 3 weeks after I signed my agreement.
There.
I mean, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. It was table topics, I didn't know what I was doing, and I won. I was like, wow, this is kind of fun. What's next? And it just kind of, the bug bit.
Well, then let's move on now. I want to move on to Lindy. Now, Lindy lives in the Pacific Northwest with her husband and 2 cats. And if you've got more cats than 2 by now, since I got the information, let us know. And she's the daughter of a librarian with an itchy foot, and she's lived internationally. She began school in Afghanistan. She graduated high school in Peru. She received her bachelor's of arts from Bowdoin College in Maine, and that must have been such an unusual experience, Maine. Her resume reads as a potpourri collection of customer service related work, from waiting tables, helping people quit smoking, chiropractic, insurance billing, working in a library. And she was the second runner-up position in the 2020 virtual World Championship of Public Speaking. So not only was it second place, but it was also that experience of our first virtual World Championship of Public Speaking. So Lindy, what brought you to Toastmasters, and what brought you to competition? And before we say welcome to our event tonight.
I had heard of Toastmasters long ago, and I honestly thought it was a bunch of square businessmen sitting around a table passing the gavel around. That's basically, I never thought was particularly drawn to my particular concept of it. But I had been working with a life coach, and we got down to the fact that I really wanted to be influential, but was not in any kind of leadership roles. And she pointed out that Toastmasters teaches leadership. And so I came for leadership. And at the same time, I have had the fortune in my life to have been involved in different performing arts, and I have not been involved for quite a while, and I missed being in the spotlight. For me, what that's about particularly is the energy exchange. It's not necessarily about applause. It's about that you say something and you feel people's response, and it just there's an aliveness in it for me. So I joined. Those is why I joined. Is that it?
That's fine. Your answer is your answer, whatever it is. Well, what brought you to competition? What made you say, I want to go beyond just this club experience and take it a step further?
I had been in less than 6 months, and the club I joined was not that year holding a club contest. They instead were looking for a volunteer to go forward to the area contest. And my hand shot up, and turned out no one else was particularly interested. And I hadn't done 6 speeches yet, which you needed to do. So they hustled around to help me get those done in time. And so I didn't really know what I was doing. But once I had been to my first contest, I was hooked. And for me, it's a fast track of learning. it just is a fast track of learning. There's nothing like it, because you don't get feedback in the contest, but in order to prepare for the contest, you get lots of feedback. And if you're willing to give yourself over to the process of letting that feedback help shape the speech that you're doing, and you go along with it and you don't get too bruised in the process, then you just grow and grow. And that is really the exciting thing for me.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We'll go ahead and move on to Louisa. And Louisa, you got to give me a minute here. I actually lost track of something up here. There we go. Oh my God, Louisa, retired at the age of 53. Can you believe that? Born and raised in South Texas. And if you saw her speech, you knew that. She later moved to Austin, where she worked at Abbott Labs for 25 years, retired at the age of 53. And she's been busy, as she mentioned earlier before we began, rescuing homeless dogs. And are you still driving them to New York City? And yeah, she's fostered and cared for over 800 homeless dogs. And she joined Toastmasters in 1989 for 3 years. This was your first. So you're not the only one with a break here. And you rejoined in 2013. And we met Phyllis Allen, your mentor, earlier. And last year, she competed in the International Speech Contest, 143 countries, 33,000 participants. She advanced to the finals, where she placed second. And she hopes one day to win first place. And she's enjoying retirement by spending as much time as possible with her mother. Although not right now, because she said there's too many dogs at her place. She had to go to Phyllis's. Too many dogs, and they would be barking every time she spoke, because they knew it'd be time to play. So Louisa, what brought you to Toastmasters first? What brought you back? And I think that was Phyllis was a part of that. And then what got you competing?
Thank you so much, sir. What brought me to Toastmasters was I was actually at Abbott Laboratories. I had been working there approximately 2 years. And I was on my way to the HR office, and it's down the long hallway, and they've got all the meeting rooms. And I passed a meeting room, and I hear people laughing. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's somebody funnier than me? Hang on, I've got to check this out. So I kind of looked in through the little window, and I see this one guy. His name is Billy Webb. That's how much I still remember who he is. And he was competing. They were having a contest, and I saw these people, and they're all clapping and applauding. So I waited for him to finish his speech. I forgot about going to HR and getting my insurance papers changed. So I walked into the door. The sergeant at arms let me in, and I said, "What's going on?" He says, "We're having a contest, and the next speaker's about to speak." So I sat there and I watched, and everybody kind of looked over me, didn't know what was going on. And then at the end of the contest, a lady came up to me, and I guess she was the president of the club. And she said, "Yes, can I help you?" And I said, "I don't know what you're doing, but I want to join." And she's like, "Oh, okay, sure. Well, we have our meetings at lunchtime and get it approved by your supervisor." And I said, "Absolutely." I joined, I believe, the next week. And it was my goal in life to beat Billy Webb at the humorous contest. So I competed my first year, and then for humorous, they were going all the way up to regional. I think now it's just to district. But I went all the way up to regional, and it was held in Denver, Colorado, exactly 30 years ago. And I placed second at the regional conference. And so 30 years later, I'm in Denver, Colorado, competing for international, and I placed second. So I guess when I'm 90 years old, I'll be in Denver, Colorado, and whatever I'm competing in, I'll get second. So that's looking for that trend. Yes.
Well, it's good to understand the patterns that are going on there.
Yes. The
and what's
algorithm.
Billy Webb doing these days? How's Billy Webb doing these days?
I have no idea, but after I joined and beat him, he quit. So there you go.
Yeah, and that proves once again that the men, we just can't take it. When you women come in and you charge ahead.
This is a women's club, right? We are promoting the woman, right? So
this is women power. That's exactly right. It's all women power. But the interesting thing is, all three of you competed early on. In other words, you weren't in your Toastmasters very, very long, before you got into competition. And it seems that that's something that some people resist right away. So if you were going to give advice, Lindy, to a new Toastmaster joining, what recommendation would you give about competing or being willing to compete?
I would say that look at what your goal is. If it has anything to do with getting better at speaking, you should be doing the contests.
Hmm.
The trick with contests, or the key rather, is putting your attention not on yourself, but on your audience. And there's some other keys when it's a computer instead of a live audience. But as soon as your attention is on somebody else, all those awful feelings about nervousness and am I going to be good enough, they just fade enough into the background that they don't get in the way. So whatever you're feeling, go for it. It really is worth its weight in growth. Absolutely.
Well, and Louisa, I noticed that you're a very introverted person. So I realized that that was really competing, was really putting yourself out there. Well, actually, what would you say to other introverted people who might be holding back and really be really feel tremulous about doing the competition?
Well, in all honesty, if someone is introvert and doesn't want to compete, I'd rather they don't compete. It gives me a better advantage, so I don't have to worry about the competition. However, if I'm supposed to give advice and actually convince someone or try to give them I guess Toastmasters has so many things to offer. I only joined because I wanted to compete. But then Phyllis said, help me charter this club. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure, Phyllis. Then she said, wait, let's go do the gavel club with these kids. And I'm like, okay, Phyllis. So things that I thought I would never do, I actually enjoy doing them. And how can I have said, or how can anybody say, I don't want to do that if you've never done it? Try it. If you don't like it, hey, I get it. Move over, let me through. But you know what? If you do something you've never done before and you like it, thank God you tried it that first time, that one time. And if you only compete one time and it's not your cup of tea, you can say, oh yeah, I competed. You know what? It's just not my thing. And we totally get it. But I say go outside the box. If you're People join Toastmasters, most of them, because they have that fear of speaking. And I cannot grasp that. I cannot fathom the idea that I am terrified of water. And you won't see me signing up for swimming lessons. I just won't do it. But for somebody to have the fear of public speaking and actually sign up to join a club so that they can overcome their fear, just go ahead and put contests next to your fear and go ahead and conquer that too while you're here.
So Maureen, I guess we decided we're going to say 50 contests, right? As opposed to or we could say 150. I don't really care. Whatever, like you said, you've been in so many. What do you think your experience was going from the different levels? The first time you did table topics at the club, and then I imagine you advanced to area and potentially on. But what do you think you learned from the advancement of shifting audiences from club to area to district? If you did a regional or semifinals, of course you did, but also up to the finals. Well, what do we learn that we don't otherwise learn by staying in our homogenous club? You're muted. You're muted. And we want to hear you.
I knew that. It's a test. And I don't even know why I'm muting myself. I don't have dogs or kids or bulldozers around. It's just I don't want you to hear my bodily function noises. I don't know. Is that TMI? Let's just go with that.
It's more of a male thing. I'm
oh no, it isn't. Oh no. I think that there were two things that had profound impact on me as I progressed from one level to another. And I have done it many times, and it's not bragging. It's just I'm kind of like addicted to it. So, it's maybe not a good thing, but it's just, the cross I bear. The first time, I call it escaping the club bubble or or the clubble. I call it the clubble. You know, your club is so warm and comfortable and fuzzy and we love each other and we know each other and we see each other every week. And yes, you're going to hear a yet another speech about my, you know, my grandkids or my trip to Mexico or whatever. But getting out of that club bubble served many purposes. First, it gave you another set of eyes and another set of ears to talk to, which energized me, at least for me. But the bigger thing, oh my gosh, there's life outside of the club. When I got, seriously, and people did it differently. They were different faces, but not just life outside of the club, the world of district. The very first time I competed at the district level and went to this district conference, I was blown away when I saw the vastness of this organization. I mean, it was so mind-blowing to me and so life expanding to me. I met people from all different walks of life and different cultures even, and economic backgrounds and corporate clubs, and it just blew my mind. And then when I made it to the finals in 2009 and I saw the international convention, oh my gosh. And the thing that really was life mind-blowing to me is that every single person at the convention, no matter what culture, what country, what company they came from, it all started with an icebreaker. And that was huge to me. World champion started with an icebreaker. District governor or district director started with an icebreaker. International president started with an icebreaker. That, I mean, talk about leveling the field for everybody. It was just tremendous to me.
And Lindy, building off what Maureen said, that same type of thing, I don't know how many experiences you had, but we'll give you, you can have 40 contests too. We can.
No, I won't even. Actually, I've only been through 3. I've only been through the international speech contest. Oh, the evaluation too. Okay. So only three different years.
Okay, so what was your experience based on what Maureen said? How did you find, what were the unexpected results you may have found that you didn't think you would experience by going into the competitive environment?
I would say 2 things. One is that it increases your visibility, and that has a 2-sided sword, of course, but it's kind of wonderful to all of a sudden know people who recognize you and who come up and say hello. You know, there's a different visibility that you have through competing, whether you win or not, because people remember you and your speech and will come up to you later when they see you and talk to you about it. And then I would agree with Maureen. In 2018, I was a semifinalist and went to Chicago, and I stood at that opening flag ceremony and just wept. I could not believe that there were flags from, I mean, I knew it was an international organization, right? You know that, but then you watch these people and these flags, and you know that those countries in real life are at war with each other. It is so profound that there's this organization that, you know, bridges that kind of differences. It just, I was moved absolutely to tears. And so that, I mean, if it takes contest, it doesn't take contest to get that experience, because you can go to an international conference, and that's what got me there.
But yet that was, again, that same type of thing of getting out of that club bubble. Although, Maureen, I do have to do a quick callback. When you said we get out of that club bubble and we find out there's life outside of our club, you didn't mean that there was life outside of Toastmasters, did you?
Hey, nobody joins Toastmasters just simply to be good at Toastmasters.
I just wanted to
be
check.
Improving our skills to get out to the, you know, the real world.
Yeah, I was getting heart palpitations. I wasn't sure. I wanted to be clear. So how about you, Louisa? Now, you started by taking on Billy Webb. You know, you took him on. You wanted to compete. You wanted that challenge. But what were any unexpected experiences you had going through the competition cycle that you feel you've learned, that you've gained from that?
You know what's funny is you just mentioned his name and my hair stands up on the back of my neck. I mean, this is 30 years later, and I'm like, oh my gosh, really? Thank you for remembering that. Thank you for mentioning his name. The thing that I uh, really was shocked at, and I guess exactly what Maureen was talking about. Everybody in your club is like, wow, that was a great speech. That's awesome. And then we had one member join, and she was Asian. And I got up there and I gave my speech, and then I did a roundhouse and said, okay, I'd like evaluation from everyone. And everyone, oh, Louisa, you were great. That was fantastic. And it came to her, and her name is Lois Kim, and she goes, I didn't understand your speech at all. And everybody just like, oh, it was like the emperor, clothing, like, oh my God, you can't speak to Louisa like that. And I said, wait a minute, what are you talking about? She says, well, you're talking about that Mexican guy and changing the tire. Why were you scared of him? I said, well, because he was a cholo. Well, what's that? I said, oh, well, it's the guy with tattoos. She goes, well, you didn't say that. So she totally opened my mind and my eyes and made me realize this is an international competition. So I went and totally rewrote the speech. And I guess getting outside of the area and then the division, and then by the time you hit division, you've got really good speakers. So you start to realize, oh wow, there's some competition here. And then you get to district, and I remember it took me 7 times at district. I lost 6 times, and of course I told myself the same thing. Stupid judges, they don't know what they're doing. But so when the judges finally came to realize that I was pretty good, which was the 7th, I realized that opened my eyes, and had I, by some miracle, placed the first year I competed, which I was kind of expecting, I never would have made it to the international stage. Never. So I'm so grateful for all the times I lost, because the first year I cried and I said I was going to quit Toastmasters, and they didn't know what they were missing. And it kind of got that little attitude thing going. And then I missed my friends at the meeting, and I actually didn't go to the next meeting. And after that, I said, you know what? I can't quit. So I went back. And it's so awesome because people will still come up to me now and say, when you were district a couple of years ago, you did that speech about the cheerleaders. Man, it was hilarious, and I love the message. And I will tell them, I said, you realize I didn't even place that year? And they said, yes. I said, can I ask you something? Can you tell me what you liked about the guy that placed first? Can you tell me what you liked about his speech? And they'll look at me and they'll say, I don't remember who won first. And I'll say, exactly. I said, you just handed me the trophy I wanted. The trophy's nice, but when somebody can come up to you 5 or 10 years later and say, that speech you gave and the idea and everything behind it, that was awesome. So to me, it's more now of, I want to leave an impression on you. I want you to remember what I was talking about. The trophy's nice. It's okay. It's great. But if you don't get the trophy, somebody coming up to you after and complimenting you years later on what they remembered you said, that's the prize.
Or how it impacted them, or how it affected them.
Exactly. That's the
I'm going to throw this next one open to all of you, and you could choose to go in whichever direction you'd like. But one of the things that I know is dwelling on everybody's mind is how have you learned to go about selecting a topic, preparing your speech? Lindy made a mention of those people who come and help. How have you sought out mentors for what you're doing? And how have your mentors helped guide you, into the success that you've been able to attain? So I'm just going to throw that open, and go ahead, Lindy.
I actually want to take a step back and say one more thing about contest takeaway this
Yes,
year,
please.
particularly for me. My biggest takeaway this year, in looking at the top 3, in looking at all of us, was how different each of us was and what different strengths we brought to the plate. And it just crystallized for me the fact that, your job as a Toastmaster as a competitor is not to become like this other champion. It's not to fit into the champion box. It's to let yourself loose. It's to take off the things that are holding you back and to shine. I mean, I can see Lisa because she really embodied, that was what was so winning about her. She was fully Louisa on stage. In 2018, when I was in Chicago, I had gotten advice. I had a suit and everything. And when I look at pictures of myself, it's like the light had dimmed. So this year I thought, I'm wearing what makes me feel most me. Of course, you can't see whether I have pants on or not this year, but I did, I promise.
And we won't ask you to stand. We won't.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that's really what it's about. I know you come to hear us talk and think, oh, how can I be like them? It's not. It's how can you let yourself shine like you so that we can take you home with us. That's really what you want to do. Thanks. I wanted to get that in.
And may I build off that before we get to the other question? And again, open forum. Is that also one of the things sometimes that, going back to Luisa's comment about how those terrible judges never saw the potential in her, but is that sometimes too that all of us seem to get in a mindset like there's a certain Toastmaster way of doing things instead of becoming the authentic speaker or person that we're choosing to be? Is that something you've experienced, or is that a buildup of what you've just shared, Lindy?
Absolutely, that's something I've experienced. And that's where it sort of intersects with your previous question, the one I had you skip over. When I was getting ready for this year's speech, people always talk about your final speech, but it's the semifinal speech that gets you through all these levels. I mean, that's a speech, Well, I was practicing it before we had the club contest, and one of the members said to me, he said, Lindy, every world champion has something that makes them distinct. For Darren LaCroix, it was his fall. For Mark Brown, it was his singing. And for you, I think it's when you sing and dance. And I'm like, because yes, I like to sing and dance, but I did not know that was that point where I came alive in a way that was mesmerizing. And you can't know that about yourself. You can only know that when someone else tells you.
Yeah. And was that the slice you left behind?
That's correct.
It's the semifinal where you sang. And then the other thing I noticed, and so I did get away from that, but I'm coming back to that question. So I'll throw this out. The other thing I noticed was that in a lot of ways, your semifinal speeches actually tied into your final speeches from a theme perspective, a thematic perspective. And what I recognized when I was listening to each of you is that you had really built kind of a premise that you felt compelled to share with people, and you had different ways of doing it. At least that was my experience. And that was the slice you left behind and your buried story. And then Maureen, I saw Pushing Your Envelope, and It's So Good to See You, which I thought really tied together nicely. They were like part of the same book and part of your whole premise that you share with, our imposter syndrome and how we kind of carry that forward. So do you find that the more competition you did, and Louisa, I'm not leaving you out, I just didn't have a chance to see your semifinal speech, but I'm sure Louisa was in it because I think that's the theme with you. But do you find that as you did more and more speaking, you found more of a sense of who you are and what you needed to share, and you were constantly finding new ways of expressing that? Or did I see more in that than was intended?
Well, I know for me personally, I'm a professional speaker, and until COVID hit, I was doing a lot of keynotes, and my keynote was always the same. The two speeches that I did for the contest, the semifinal and the final speech, were parts of my keynote. The semifinal speech of Pushing Your Envelope, when I climbed into the jet engine, that's my closing story of my keynote. And the story of running into my senior prom date in the hospital is a story that supports one of my points in my keynote. So my goal this year in competing wasn't just to compete. It wasn't to win. It wasn't to, let's try this new virtual thing, which I hated. I hated it, but hey, worked out okay. My goal was to make my keynote better.
Yeah.
My goal was to make my keynote better. It was a selfish, promotional, professional choice to enter.
Oh, but it was a beautiful choice. Let's not talk about selfish promotional, because there's beautiful, a couple of points that I think should come out when Maureen has to go into a jet engine because the guy who came to go in to measure the inside is too big.
He just didn't fit.
So the woman has to go in to make the measurements that she doesn't know how to do. And you said it's the jet engine that you see on F-14s. And what I loved about the point she made is that the woman who went in was different than the woman who came out, is what you said. And that you said fear went in and fortitude came out. And I thought, what a powerful message if you took nothing else away from that speech. That message alone is a powerful message. And I wanted to repeat that for the Women Lead Toastmasters so they can write that down and quote you. But but also what Lindy did is that she did sing. She talked about how you had always wanted to be a form of a performer, and you had actually kind of, the two stories went together. The slice you left behind, where you said it's time to reclaim your passions. And then your buried story is, which stories are we keeping inside of ourselves and not sharing with our Toastmasters clubs? Because by sharing them, we get better. So we need to stop hiding.
I think as you watch people, you do start to see themes. For instance, every time I've seen Kwong, it had some version about kindness. It's really the core of him. But I don't think, here's how I encourage you finding what that is for you. It's not, what do I have to share? It's, what do I need to hear? Because when you embrace something that's got that kind of significance for you, then it doesn't matter how many times you have to give it, it's going to have resonance because it's something that's central to what you're dealing with.
So it's about what you need to hear from you, for you. Is that how you mean it when you say, what do I need to hear?
Yeah, well, of course I'm speaking, but what message is it that I need to hear? You know, reclaiming passions was something I needed, that I constantly need to have reinforced. And the other one's a little bit of a one-off, because when that happened, that I found my Peruvian family again, I knew I wanted my Toastmasters world, as many as I could share it with, to know about that, because that was just a miracle for me.
But that opened you up to the larger story as well.
Yeah.
Yes, as well. Now, Louisa, of course, you are just Louisa. You come and go, Louisa. And so my question to you, building off of this theme, is, have there been times when people have said, oh, Louisa, if you want to do that speech or compete, you should be more like this or more like that? But you continued to say, no, I'm Louisa, I'm going to be me, because your authenticity was an extraordinarily powerful part of your story. It just was absolutely you. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'm not sure if there's a question. I guess the question is, have people said, you need to change this, you need to change that?
You need to be someone else, or do it a different way that's not you. Because we're all so helpful as Toastmasters.
Yes, I have never had someone come up to me and tell me that I needed to say something different or do something different. I have had people come up to me and say, for example, on the semifinal speech, I actually get up on stage and I say, stop, I can't do this. And I walk off. And when I did that at district, one gentleman, I placed first, and one gentleman came up to me and said, I didn't understand your intro. It doesn't go with your speech. You need to eliminate that. And instead of, of course, sometimes we get upset or offended, like, what do you know? And I asked him, instead of getting offended, I said, wait a minute, what didn't you understand? He said, you confused me. I didn't know it was a joke. I said, oh, okay. So when I did my semifinal speech in Denver, I actually turn and I laugh at the audience, and then they go, ah, you were fooling us. So by letting the audience know, then it was okay and it was accepted and everyone understood it. But I have gotten comments. In fact, I mentioned this before. I was given a speech to my cousin and her 12-year-old daughter. And I said, hey, let me try this out on you. Tell me what you think. And I'm speaking and I'm talking about my uncle, and he passed away. And then before I can even say the next sentence, my cousin's daughter says, how did he die?
Mm.
And my cousin said, shh, she's giving a speech. You don't interrupt her. But I stopped and I went back and I said, well, wait a minute. If a 12-year-old wants to know how my uncle died, the whole audience is going to want to know.
Yeah.
So I put it in there so you can get feedback from anyone and everyone. The thing is, are you receptive to someone coming up to you and saying, that didn't work, or I didn't get it, or that wasn't very good? Once you get past that and ask them, okay, wait, why didn't you get it? Why wasn't it why weren't you receptive to it? Once you get past that and ask them why and find out the real why, then it's your decision whether you want to change your speech or keep it and improve it. So I don't think anybody's ever come up and said, you need to change or you need to do this differently. I have had some people come up and say, hey, why don't you try this? And I'm like, no, thank you.
Well, let's go back to the question we kind of moved away from then. Let's, how do you go about developing your speeches? What are your kernels? Now, Maureen, you said you're addicted, but there are worse things to be addicted to. So how do you go about developing your speech and developing through the process? And especially, I want to caveat this because I don't know anybody on the call that may have had, the World Championship experience. How do you go about preparing, that semifinal speech with your speech that takes you up through district and your final speech for the World Championship? How do you plan for that? How do you think through that as you're going through the process? So anyone, it's an open forum.
I think key and first and foremost and key for me is word count, getting my message into 700 words, which is that's a big project for me. I can't say my name in 700 words. So it's been, being concise, compelling, and taking people on a journey. You don't do that with one speech. A great speech is not written, it's rewritten and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. It's imperative that you get feedback, and not just feedback from your club, but coaching. I mean, I tapped into some excellent coaches. Darren LaCroix he's one of my best friends. So I've got that added advantage that I've got him on speed dial. And he doesn't seem to mind. He's like, okay, let's see what we're going to do today. Mark Brown is another dear friend of mine who was always so available to help me. Many of my club members that might not, and this is kind of interesting, there are a lot of Toastmasters that may not ever want to compete. And they may, even if they do want to compete, they may never win, but man, they can pinpoint good things in your speech, pinpoint where you need to change something. They're great evaluators, and I never dismiss that. So yeah, it is a journey. It's intense. It's humbling, and it's worth it. But it's hard work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially because once you start the journey, if you're serious, at what point Maureen, would you prepare a semifinal and final speech in your journey if you were starting out today?
Okay, so my final speech this year, I had to change, not just rewrite, I had to pitch one speech completely and go to another one because I did not understand the rules well enough. I had intended to use my 2009 final speech. I'm sorry, my 2009 regional speech in this year's finals, and found out about 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks before the contest that I wasn't allowed to do that. So yeah, I had a little bit of work to do. I had a little bit of ground to catch up.
How about you, Lindy? From ground zero up to the World Championship, how do you plan, prepare?
When I start to write a speech, I never know what it's about, and I always feel like I'm in the dark. I'm a writer more than a speaker, you put me up for table topics, I will lose and get the biggest counter count of anybody. So it really, in some ways, I feel like, you know, the what they say about Michelangelo and the marble, how it was about uncovering what was there, already there. It was that same process that these ladies have been talking about of being receptive and allowing that to shift you and your perspective and your willingness to try something different. It takes me usually a few times. It's not that I have no clue. I mean, I go into what has significance for me, but it's not tight. It doesn't really make sense. Maybe. I mean, it's a mess when I start, and that's part of it is understanding that you need to be willing to make a mess.
Well, when you say it's a mess for you, do you mean in terms of, and you don't know what you're going to say, does it mean you have no idea you want to talk about a particular theme, or you don't know how you want to talk about it? Or is it both?
I never stand up to speak without knowing exactly what I'm going to say, for exactly the reasons that I told you.
Well,
I'm not an extemporaneous speaker.
At that point, yeah, at that point, I figured you know. But when you're writing it, I'm sorry. So when you say it's tough for you to write, is it tough because you don't know what theme you want to speak about, or is it just the words, or is it?
No, it's not that it's tough for me to write. It's just that what comes out isn't nice and clean and
Oh, gotcha.
and well organized and doesn't have a foundational phrase or doesn't have the right story necessarily. It's all right. I mean, it's usually enough to get me through the club contest, and so that's great. You're right. I've got to jump, and then I have to work, to get it to the next layer.
So similar to Maureen's issue of the 700 words, kind of getting it down to that and what it is you really want to say. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and every time that you go to a club and they give you feedback, most of the feedback is about something that you should add. So this makes it very challenging because you might come with 700 words and pretty soon you have 900. And now what are you going to leave behind because you've added something else?
Yeah. So how about you, Louisa? What's your experience? You're certainly a storyteller, so you like your stories.
Well, thank you. My mentor, Phyllis Allen, who I mentioned earlier, just turned 90 years old and has been in Toastmasters for 42 years. Wow. I remember going to a meeting and nobody had a speech ready. And she looked at me and she says, "Don't you have a speech ready?" And I said, "No." And I looked at her like, I didn't sign up for a speech. I signed up for timer, okay? And she said, "Well, all the good speakers, all the great speakers have a pocket speech." And I'm like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, you're always supposed to have a speech in your back pocket. You don't have anything?" And I went, yeah, I do. Of course I do." So I got up there and I had just been cleaning out my garage and I had found the 16 by 20 picture frame of the picture I had taken in Mexico City that I speak about in my semifinals. So I said, "Oh, I'll just talk about that and everything that I learned when I was 18. And after I gave the speech, of course, it wasn't what you saw for the semifinal, but after I gave the speech and sat down, there's this gentleman that always escorts his wife to the meeting, and he sits in the back. He doesn't give speeches. He doesn't participate. He never says a word until he's leaving. He'll say, "See you later." Well, he came up to me. He says, "That's your next winning speech, Louisa." And I went, "What? Are you kidding me? It's a bullfight. It's a picture, that's all it was." He goes, "No, work on it. That's your next winning speech." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I went home, jazzed it up a bit, worked on it. And then ironically, the finals, see, I'd never been to an international convention. So last year in Denver was my first. And there was so much love. If you can grasp what I'm trying to say, there was so much warmth. So after I gave my semifinal speech, it was like everybody was my best friend, and they're like, "Wow, that's great! Can I have a picture with you? Can this and that?" And I'm like, "What? If you've never had that or never seen that before, it's a lot to take in." So I had my final speech ready, and it wasn't anything of what I wanted to present to all my new friends, because it was kind of a Debbie Downer speech. And I said, I can't do this. So I had the heart of the speech ready. So I completely changed the intro and I completely changed the end. And that was the night before. That was Friday night in the hotel room. I remember I had brought the hat because I was going to talk about my grandmother and how she picked cotton in the fields, and she always wore her hat, and it was this symbolism, and how my grandmother's hands didn't have any fingerprints because she left them all on the cotton fields because she picked cotton for 65 years. And in 65 years, she'd only missed 5 days of work. And I wanted to talk about that. And I went, I don't think this audience wants to hear that. So I remember looking at myself in the mirror there in the hotel room, and Phyllis says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm rewriting my speech." Why? She goes, "I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to go talk to the past governor and this and that." And I'm like, "Sure, go ahead." And I'm looking at the mirror and I grab my hat and I put it on and go, "Howdy, y'all. I'm Luis Montalvo and I'm from South Texas."
Yeah, that's right.
I said, "Okay, that works for me." So I wrote it down and did the intro, and I already had the meat of it, which was the changing the flat tire. And how you pick something is, I've learned that you don't attack your audience. You don't want to do that. Only one person's ever been able to do that in the history of entertainment, and that was Don Rickles. Other than that, when you attack yourself, if you're able to attack yourself, and all I really wanted my audience to do was stop and think, I've done exactly what Luis has done. That means I'm a racist. That's all I wanted my audience to take away from it, is that I wanted them to realize, oh, I think I've made that mistake too. If you present yourself in all your rawness and all your disappointment and all your embarrassment, then people are more receptive to listening to what you have to say, because you're not attacking the audience. You're saying, "Look, I've messed up." And then your audience says, "I've messed up too." That was
Do you still practice Mexican judo though? You may want to share with people what that is.
That's hilarious.
For those of you that haven't seen the contest speech, the final speech, the gentleman that I tried to change the tire for, or I actually did change the tire for, and it took me 4 minutes, not 5, but he threatened me, and I actually realized that I had to leave parts of the actual situation out. There wasn't one guy that got out of the car. There were 3 guys. And I actually thought I was going to die that day. I looked at him, I said, "They're going to rape me. They're going to kill me. They're going to take my car. This is me. I'm Hispanic. I'm Mexican. And I'm looking at 3 Mexican guys and I'm saying, my life is over today." And that was the whole point, was how can I have other people from other races treat me fairly when I couldn't even do that to my own race? So when the guy comes up to me and I've got a crowbar in one hand and a hammer in the other, and I'm really trying to scare him because I'm scared. And he says, hey, you're just gonna help me change my tire, right? And I said, yeah, but you don't want to mess with me because I know Mexican judo. And he looked at me and he says, Mexican judo? What's that? And I said, "You don't know if I got a gun. You don't know if I got a knife. You don't know if I'm crazy." He goes, he says, no, I just want you to change my tire. And you know, I really felt bad. I actually gave him $25. And the reason I did was the tire that I was putting on to replace the bad one was bald. It was just completely bald. And I felt bad for him. I said, "You know what? There's this little tire shop right down the street. Take this money." He goes, no. I was going to give you money for beer. I said, no, I don't drink beer. I said, "Just take this money, go buy another tire, because I don't want to have to stop and help you again, because the tire you're putting on is not going to last 5 miles. He said, "Oh, you're right, Ruka. You're right. I said, "Okay." But so it was, and we actually did exchange numbers, and he called me a couple of times. "Hey, how you doing? I said, I'm doing good. Jesus, how are you? So it was pretty good. And so I just wanted the humiliation and the embarrassment. I wanted that to come through,
Yeah.
and I hope I got that across.
Oh, it was brilliant. It was brilliant.
Thank you.
So Maureen, going back to your 700 words, how long would you say a speech takes you to prepare? On average.
Gosh.
I mean, a speech, not your
Until I
keynote.
have to give it, I don't know. I don't know if there's like a timeline. It's like, okay, contest is today. I guess I'm done. I don't have a timeline. It's an organic process. Each speech is different. I'm always trying to focus on clarity of the message, emotional connection with the audience, and having fun.
Yeah.
You know, I long ago gave up winning contests because I've seen so many wacky, wonky things happen at contests.
Yeah.
I cannot connect my worth with the outcome of any contest. I can't. And you know, it's just like, oh gosh, I guess I lost another one. Okay, let's go. Let's go out for dinner.
What I liked in watching your material as well is that there was a defined structure that I could follow. I could almost follow your thought process by listening to your speech, and I liked that. I mean, for me, that was a strength. I don't your eyes are getting big, and I don't mean it as a negative.
No, it's just that because I'm an engineer. I think very linear, very logical, very structured.
Yeah, and I always remember you've talked about evaluation. There's this one fellow I used to love to listen to his evaluations, only because by listening to him evaluate somebody, I knew how to do an evaluation because of the way he did it. It had a mind like yours. It, like you said, is very linear. I loved watching the structure, the construct, and knowing how you were going. And so I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Lindy, what I enjoyed about yours was that sense of two things that came through for me was that sense of theatrics, but not an overdone theatrics. It was a subtle theatrics. Plus, I loved your singing. But also, there was always a heart present. You actually were doing, especially when you were talking about bringing your buried story out, you were bringing your heart out. And you were asking us to take care of your heart as we listened to what you were sharing. And I really honor you for that as well. I truly just, all three of you brought so many different elements to your presentations, but it goes to what you shared. Be yourself. Everybody should be yourself. So Lindy,
I will say though, if I could add something in there, while I was preparing for the finals this year, I have a tendency to be over choreographed and overdone in my contest speeches. And I'm not like that when I give my keynotes. I'm very natural and very conversational. And my coaches, Darren being one of them, called me out on it when he saw me practice for my for my final speech about a week or so before the contest. And I was with a group of people on a virtual practice session. They called me out on it. They said, "You're fake, you're phony, you're overdone, you're over choreographed. You need to dial it back. You're just like too much." And I was like, I don't understand. You know. So I had to work hard to literally dial it down, pull it back, be conversational, just be genuine, and just be me, because I was this. Like, I am going to walk to the park so I can ride the bike. It was just ridiculous. And unfortunately, I see far too much of that in the contest. And I realized I didn't want to be like that. So in a matter of literally 2 days, where I worked hard to throttle it back, dial it down, tone it down, and connect with all those eyes that I presented to see right there on the camera. The difference was night and day for me.
Well, and I would say the virtual environment really takes that truth and brings it up a level, because the camera really picks up what's true, and anything fakey shows on camera in a way that it doesn't on stage. So it required it even more than it might have on the live stage, Maureen. And that was another piece of feedback I got early on, before club contest, it was the person was very insightful. They said, you know, in Toastmasters, we learn kind of a way that we speak, a rhythm. And I wasn't really aware of that. He said, you need to take it out of that rhythm. And so that's what I really worked hard to do all that time that Maureen can't tell you how long it takes of repeating and repeating to internalize it enough so that you don't have to say it the same way every time. You know, you have to know it well enough that you can speed up or slow down or go higher or lower. It's something because it sounds a lot more natural when it's varied than when it has the rhythm. You end up having a rhythm.
What I especially like that you did, Lindy, in yours, because you were in the virtual environment, so you were preparing for that. But you did a lot of, you'd be standing here, then you'd come close. And usually when you came close, just about every time you smiled real big. So it would come close and it would be very inviting. So it didn't become invasive, and it also didn't become threatening. And it was a natural part of, especially when you said in looking into the eyes and you would come forward and do that. It was really very nicely done and had a nice flow to it. It felt very natural versus, as Maureen was talking about, sometimes when we overstructure, it's like, you know.
Well, thank you. And that, you know, I encourage people to think about it's the difference between theater and film. I mean, in film, you do get close-ups, and those are the intimate moments.
Yeah.
You can't do that on stage. So it really is a gift. Of course, you don't want to overuse it and so forth, but it is a way of getting up close and personal and asking a personal question, or, you know, giving people a confession or an aside. It's the perfect way to do that.
In your speech preparations, how do you, like, for instance, in Louisa's final, you did the callback by doing the callback of, you know, you started with, you know, howdy, I'm from South Texas and I'm Louisa. And then at the end, you did the callback after you know, the hat's back on and you did that callback, you know, you all come down and that type of thing. And once again, you're inviting us down. So you started us with this South Texas twang type thing, closed us with the South Texas twang. I keep disappearing, I apologize. But how do Lindy and Maureen, how do you plan your opening and closing in your presentations, especially with a competition in mind? Do you try to do callbacks or do you try to just sum up your presentation?
I'll make a confession. Until I saw Ramona Smith win in Chicago, what they teach you in Toastmasters about the opening, closing, and 3 points, I thought, yeah. And then when Ramona did her speech, I got it. I mean, my mind is not that linear as yours is, Maureen. And so that business, it just, I don't know, I couldn't quite connect with it. That wasn't the way my mind works, but I got it. It's just crystal clear. And that's kind of the journey I don't start there, but I have to get there with that kind of clarity.
Yeah, and I teach presentation skills, and one of the things that I teach people is it's a simple technique, but it's so powerful, is that you really should tie your opening to your closing. Call it a callback, call it mirroring, call it repeating, whatever it is, but somehow, because here's what happens, it's like going on a roller coaster. You get on a roller coaster at the platform and you go on this wild ride and woo, up and down and twirly and inside out, and you come back to the same platform and you feel this incredible sense of finality. And we need to do that with our presentations. Otherwise, they're like, is it over yet? I don't know. What am I supposed to do next?
And so let's, if I may, Maureen, just kind of build on that, and kind of as we build to a kind of a wrap up type of here. If I were sitting down today and asking you to coach me into competition, what would be the key things you'd want to start me on and want me to keep focused on, or getting ready to compete you on do?
There's so many, you know, I need to assess where you are, what your skills are, and where you,
suck.
where do we need to, no, nobody does. But first and foremost, I don't teach people to win contests.
Right.
I don't do that. I teach people to impact lives. So first and foremost, what's the message that you want your audience to walk away with? And it must be a message for them. It can't just simply be your cool story. We all have a cool story. we've all learned things from our cool stories, but we've learned things that we need to pass on to other people. So what is that message, what does that carry, that takeaway, that life lesson that other people can use? So let's get focused on the message. And then let's work on structure, because structure is important. And then let's work on the delivery.
Okay. So in essence, what, and then structure, and then worry about the delivery as the last point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then how about you, Lindy? What recommendations or advice would you give me? And it can be the same, it could be different, it can be an add-on, your choice.
I like what Maureen says. In addition, I'd add something that someone said in a humorous speech contest that I think goes for international speech too. It was make them laugh, make them cry, make them laugh, and leave. I thought that summed it up pretty well.
Make them laugh, make them cry. How about you, Louisa? What would you add anything or?
No, what Maureen said.
Okay, great. No. That's perfect, because I think
Funny.
To me, if the message is, it's key. It's key that if you don't have a message, why are you talking? Why are you talking?
Right.
I have friends of mine, and we always get together, and there's about 20 or 30 of us, and they'll say, Louisa, tell us a story. And I'll have to stop and think, okay, I've got a story, but why am I telling them the story?
Yeah.
We all want the lesson. We don't want to hear about your cat and it climbed up a tree and then the fireman came. What's the lesson? What did you learn? So that's exactly what Maureen said. It's key. It's what is your message? What is your message?
So do the messages have to be profound, or can they be simple? I mean, because sometimes it seems like we dig for some profound point when,
well, any message that changes a life is profound
by its nature.
Story, yeah, but the story that wraps it, that it's wrapped around, could very well be simple, but the message that changes lives, we never should underestimate the power of a great message.
Yeah. Or kind of like the story of changing a tire, that type of thing, where the underlying message is profound, but the story has a simple, very direct journey from point A to point B. Yeah.
I think when you're speaking about the story is, Maureen said it needs to be profound. Well, first of all, you have to ask yourself, are you competing? Because if you're not competing, you can tell a story with a hilarious message, and it's good. But if you're competing, then it almost needs to be profound if you're competing, because that's what we're expecting. So that's all I wanted to say. Is like you said, it's got to be profound. You're changing lives. Oh yeah, but if you're at a cocktail party, you're not competing. Give a funny story with a hilarious message. That's fun.
Well, in that sense, though, then the goal is different. Truly entertaining somebody, that's profound.
Yeah.
Even making them laugh, lifting up their day. Man, I live for moments like that, and I don't get a trophy or a ribbon for doing that. I just get, man, she's a lot of fun at a party.
There you go.
Yes.
Well, and I would say people get confused, or I mean, what does profound mean exactly? I mean,
Yeah.
Very simple things can be very profound. And
Yeah.
one of the mistakes I think people make is thinking that they need something original. Hello, there's nothing original under
There's
the sun.
nothing original. Yeah.
What makes it original is that it comes through you. It has your own stories, and it has therefore its own flavor. But you know, you're not going to make up a message that no one's ever done before. It's okay. When you've been in contests a while, and Maureen will, I'm sure, substantiate this, you start to see the themes. You start to see the bullying speeches, the face your fear speeches, the carpe diem speeches. There are themes to it. And the reason for that is because we're all human and we all deal with those themes. So it's a good thing, actually.
So if I could summarize and challenge me if I say this wrong, really, it seems that if it's something we're going to share, by its very nature, if it's going to change people's lives, going to what Maureen said, it's profound in and of itself. But by the same token, the story itself doesn't have to be big. I don't have to have scaled the mountain to have found that lesson or share that lesson. But so the story can be simple. The message itself, if it's worth sharing and can change someone's life if they recognize it, is profound by its very nature.
I mean, hey, Luisa and Prez, they both changed a tire. I mean, what? Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And taught us all about Mexican judo. So I know some of the people would love to hear your speeches. And of course, Renee has actually posted the links into the chat rooms. But I will ask if there's anything or a little snippet. We've heard Luisa and her Mexican judo. Is there a song that you might want to share, Lindy, or just a piece of something? Or Maureen, is there a little snippet of a story or a part of a story you would like to share? And I'm putting you on the spot. And you can also say, because I know you don't like table topics, Lindy. I know I put you on the spot. But is there anything you would like to share that comes from any of your speeches or any of your competition?
Well, my Pushing Your Envelope speech for my semifinal. Pushing Your Envelope is actually the name of the book that I wrote. And in my professional world, I speak on imposter syndrome, which is this irrational fear that smart people are not convinced that they really are smart, even though all the data says, yeah, you're pretty smart. And I struggled with it at NASA. And I am not kidding. That experience of climbing into that F404 turbofan engine to take those simple measurements really did change me. As simple and unprofound as that sounds, it was profound because I really was, it made me realize that taking, and my line from the speech is nudge, push, never the same. When you nudge against a limit and you push just a little further, you will never be the same.
Yeah. And I apologize if I took some of that thunder away by using those quotes earlier, but they were just so profound to me, the way you shared that and how you shared that. And that was fabulous.
That was my favorite speech. I love that speech.
And I loved the emphasis in that because you did it several times. Nudge, push, never the same.
And I will give credit to Darren LaCroix for that line. He was the one that came up with that one. And I was like, oh, yes. Can I use it?
Yeah. I bet you he learned that line though when he was doing Subway sandwiches. I'm just saying, nudge, push, never the same. So how about you, Lindy? Is there something you would like to share or?
My final speech starts like this. There is a story that you never tell anyone because you're afraid they'll find out the truth and think less of you. That is your buried story. Yeah. And that is really what I encourage you to bring, whether it's for contest or just your clubs. That kind of story is what's scariest to put out there, and it is life-changing for you and the people who listen. You will bond with each other. It is so wonderful. The first Toastmasters meeting I went to, both speakers gave really moving speeches, and I couldn't sign up fast enough. Turned out nobody ever did speeches like that. I mean, no, but that is just, that really attracts me, that kind of personal vulnerability and revelation. Of course, you have to make the environment safe to do that, but I encourage all of you.
Well, and as you mentioned in your speech also, is that we go to Toastmasters where we can practice these things and tease them out of ourselves. Again, the nudges that Maureen's talking about. But what I also like about Darren LaCroix, Maureen, he says all the time, Toastmasters is where we go to practice and fail. So that's where we try things out to see how they work and how they work for us. And certainly for the three of you, a lot of that has worked really, really well. If you have any final thoughts or final guidance or tips you'd like to share with everyone, please share whatever you would like or whatever you would like to stress.
Just thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. This was a joy.
Well, we can thank Abhijit and the Women Lead Toastmasters for that. Abhijit says we have a couple of questions though.
Yes. Yeah, I will ask them. Okay. The first question comes from Lorraine.
We have 10 minutes left, Abhijit. So
yes. Okay. Lauren wants to ask Maureen, what made the club feel like home?
I guess it was just a sense of welcome and professionalism. It was a lunchtime club in a corporate building. It wasn't a corporate club, but it was in a corporate building, and it drew a corporate audience. And it just was sophisticated and professional and right up my alley. And they were just so much flippin' fun.
Thank you, Maureen. The next question was, did any one of you get coaches? And if yes, how did you go about finding them?
People told me I needed to call the world champion back in 2009. I had many people tell me, call the world champions. They'll help you. They live to give. And it intimidated me at the time because I thought, ooh, they're scary. So it took a lot of guts for me to actually call one of them. And I called three. I worked with three. I worked with Jim Key quite a bit as well. And I found them all to be very gracious and generous and incredibly brilliant.
Thank you.
How about you, Lindy? How did you get your coach? We know Louisa also had Phyllis.
I would say that over time, I've gotten a feel for who tends to have the most insightful comments within the Toastmaster circle I reach. Because this is, I don't think it's, I think it's depending on who you are and what works for you. So many people I talked to as they were preparing for semifinals and finals took their speech to, countless clubs and got all this feedback. I just don't have the thick skin to do that. I just could not do that. So I went to places where I knew and trust, and I took it really to heart, and I worked really hard on what I heard and what I could do. So I guess I want to say that there's not just one right way. Find what works for you.
Thank you. The next question is, Kirti has heard, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. How much do we skew from the truth to make a story more interesting?
Lisa, you should take that one.
Luisa, do you want me to repeat the question? Yeah.
I think the question is, how far from the truth can you wander to make a story interesting? And I say not too far. That's my personal opinion. Now you can I've condensed characters, I've shortened timelines, I have amplified physical characteristics to make a visual picture in somebody's mind. Like when I talked about Bob, I don't remember if that was his name, but Big Bob sounded good. So I put it as Bob, and he was a big guy. Was he 6 feet wide? I don't know, but he was big. So, I exaggerated some things, but the elements of the story were completely 100% true.
Well, I think for me that having the authentic emotional connection myself to what I'm talking about is key. And so there's certain things I can't get too far away from what my experience was. As if it's peripheral, like what Maureen is saying, absolutely no big deal. Because in some ways, to make it 700 words, there's some of that just has to happen. Like Louisa said, there's parts of the story you have to throw out because there's no time for it. And sometimes it confuses the issue, and that's a good thing to be able to recognize too, is how to get really to the heart of what you are trying to say.
Thank you.
If I could add something.
Sure.
I realized when I competed for the Tall Tales contest that I had no imagination, because I actually used a real live situation I'd been in. And when I actually got to the Tall Tales contest, they're all talking about why McDonald's passes out ketchup, and another guy's talking about how he was the captain of the sea and he had a parrot on his shoulder. And I'm talking about beer wrestling for rent money, which was actually what I did when I was 18. And it was quite shocking to realize I had no imagination. I couldn't come up with a Star Wars or Bilbo Baggins, The Hobbit. I couldn't come up with anything like that. I had to use actual stories that I had lived through. So when you say how far from the truth, I can't do it. I'm incapable of being imaginative, which was shocking for me. But thank God all my real stories are so crazy that it gets me to the stage. So that's great.
Thank you.
I think coming up with Mexican judo and judo no is pretty darn creative.
And
I
let
have-
me add that I had actually heard that on TV and I used it. And I think one of the very few original things that I said was where the guy tells me his name is Jesus, and in English you spell it Jesus. So I think my best line, which was original, I said, "Okay, Jesus, what's your joke?" I patted myself on the back for months. I'm like, man, that was really good, Lisa. That was really good because it was actually original. So, but anyway, yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
I had this one last question. This was my experience today. I was working with this one mentee. The mentee said, was not comfortable sharing personal stories. How do I work with that mentee? Because sometimes I feel the personal stories are more impacting to people. How do you work with that? Very new to Toastmasters. Yeah, go ahead, Luis.
The person doesn't want to share a personal story.
Yes, does not feel comfortable sharing it.
Can that person say, I had a friend and this situation happened, to where she's sharing actually her own story, but everybody listening to the speech might think that it's a friend of hers was involved with this? I'm not sure. And if you can't share a personal story, it may take her a few years to actually get to that point, or him. It may take him a few years to actually get to that point. But I think those are the most powerful and most impactful stories.
And if it were me and it was my mentee, I would just be sitting down over coffee saying, tell me about it. And if they can do it one-on-one, then eventually they can build. And that I mentioned just in passing before, but I've been doing meetings where I've been bringing Your Buried Story as a theme to the meeting, and I make everyone raise their right hand and say, I solemnly promise that what I hear here today stays here. So that there's that just acknowledgement of the importance of confidentiality. Because everyone's had an experience of someone's leaking something that it feels like a betrayal, and definitely don't want to go there.
Well, I would actually suggest you have that person look at Lindy's final Your Buried Story and let them think about the message that's put in there as well.
Thank you. That's high praise.
Back to you, Solar.
All right. So would any of you like to have some final messages, final thoughts, or anything you'd like to share for the people that you haven't already? You've shared so much. It's truly been wonderful, and you've been gracious, and we're blessed to have the information from you.
Well, thank you again for the
I
privilege.
just say that the only difference between you and us is that we're spotlighted right now. Your turn. You can be here just the same as we are.
Okay. And with that, thank you once again, all three of you, for your time and generosity. And I'll turn it back over to Cedric, our Toastmaster, in Maui, making us feel bad.
Thank you so much, Salazar. Thank you all our guests for coming. I have a bug with my virtual background. It has dimmed a little, so I apologize for the light. I didn't plan on this timing. It just went so fast, I didn't realize the sun has set in between. But I am totally honored to have heard from these three amazing women whose speeches I truly enjoyed very, very much. I believe Louisa should have won last year, and Lindy and Maureen should have been both first this year. I'm completely convinced. If there are a few points that I gathered from today's advice for those of you who are not part of Toastmasters, the first step to championship is to join Toastmasters. So if you want to get there, made the first step, sign up. Renee has been putting some links there. You can join this club or any other club. There are many out there. The second thing is to start with your icebreaker. Like everyone, champion, director, everyone starts with an icebreaker. So just go ahead, do that. It's the first step. Then exit your clubble once you're ready, your little club bubble, and go see that the world is big. Salazar will say the world of Toastmasters is big. And it goes through every country, all ages. You can get feedback from people in different countries, different cultures, whether they're 10 years old, or 90, they will be giving you feedback that can be very impactful for your speech. Be receptive